His plan to show off his success crumbled as she emerged as the resort's new owner with 3 handsome boys calling her Mommy. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. New York's winter was showing its cruelest side on that December night. Zoe Johnson, 27 years old, stared out the subway window at the snowflakes beginning to fall while she absent-mindedly caressed her 3-month pregnant belly. Marcus Reynolds' words still echoed in her mind like freshly inflicted stab wounds. Just 2 hours ago, she had ascended to the top floor of the Empire State Corporate Center, headquarters of Reynolds Development, one of Manhattan's most prestigious real estate firms. Zoe worked as an executive assistant in the marketing department of an agency that provided services to Reynolds. It was during a corporate party 6 months earlier that she met Marcus, the heir and CFO of the family business. Their romance began discreetly, intensely, with Marcus always taking her to exclusive restaurants in neighborhoods far from his social circles. "Our little secret," he would say with a charming smile that melted Zoe's defenses. The daughter of Jamaican immigrants who struggled to provide her education in Brooklyn, Zoe had earned a scholarship to Columbia but was still paying off student loans while building her career. The subway jolted, mirroring the upheaval in her heart. She recalled every detail of that meeting, how she'd spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, practicing what to say, hoping against hope that Marcus would react differently than she feared. The receptionist had eyed her suspiciously when she arrived unannounced at the Reynolds Development office. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Reynolds?" The woman's perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently on her keyboard. "No, but it's important. Please tell him Zoe Johnson is here." To her surprise, Marcus had agreed to see her. His corner office on the 47th floor showcased a panoramic view of Manhattan at dusk, the city lights beginning to twinkle as day surrendered to night. The smell of polished wood and expensive cologne hung in the air. "Zoe," he'd said, his voice professional, distant, nothing like the warm whispers she'd grown accustomed to during their secret rendezvous. "This is unexpected." She stood awkwardly by the door, suddenly aware of her department store blazer and sensible shoes. "I needed to talk to you. I've been trying to reach you for days. I've been in Tokyo, closing the Nakamura deal." He poured himself a whiskey from a crystal decanter, not offering her anything. "What's so urgent?" Her practiced speech evaporated. She'd imagined this moment differently, perhaps in one of their intimate dinner spots, where she could hold his hand as she told him. Not here, in this sterile monument to wealth and power where she felt like an intruder. "I'm pregnant," she finally said, the words hanging in the air between them. The silence that followed seemed eternal. Marcus's expression shifted from shock to disbelief, then to something more calculated as he took a long sip of his whiskey. "Pregnant?" His voice was incredulous. "That can't be happening." "It is. I'm 3 months along. I've seen a doctor." Marcus set his glass down and walked to the window, his back to her. "You know this doesn't make sense, right?" When he turned, his face had hardened. "My family has expectations. The company is about to go public. A scandal would be inconvenient." "I'm not asking for anything, Marcus. I just thought you should know." His laugh was the worst part, cold, almost condescending. "Let's be realistic, Zoe. You're a Brooklyn girl with potential, yes, but this baby would be a mistake for both of us. My family would never accept, well, you. A black assistant with a Reynolds baby? The shareholders would have a fit." He opened a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. "How much?" "What? How much to handle this discreetly? I know clinics. I can arrange everything." Zoe felt her stomach turn. "I'm not going to abort our child." Marcus's smile disappeared. "Then it's your problem. You were fun, Zoe, but let's be honest. You were never enough for someone like me. A temporary distraction, nothing more." He filled out a check and slid it across the glass desk. "Use this for whatever you need, but don't contact me again. My lawyers will be in touch regarding a confidentiality agreement." You think you can just pay me to disappear? I'm not asking, I'm telling. You don't belong in my world. You never did. If you come forward with stories about this baby, I'll deny everything and ruin what's left of your career." He checked his watch. "I have a meeting in 5 minutes with people who actually matter." Zoe left the check untouched and walked out with what little dignity she could muster. In the reception area, Marcus's secretary gave her a pitying look. That look that said she wasn't the first to leave there with a broken heart. Now, on the subway returning to her one-bedroom apartment in Flatbush, reality hit her in waves. Unemployed, she had resigned to avoid awkwardness when her belly started showing, 3 months behind on rent, and pregnant by a man who had treated her like garbage. The subway car was nearly empty this late. A homeless man dozed in the corner, clutching a plastic bag of possessions. An elderly woman with grocery bags sat across from her, occasionally glancing at Zoe with tired eyes. Did she somehow know? Could she see the devastation written on Zoe's face? When Zoe finally reached her stop, she trudged up the stairs to the street, the cold wind cutting through her inadequate coat. Her neighborhood felt especially bleak tonight. The bodega with its flickering sign, the laundromat where she spent Sunday mornings, the check-cashing place with bulletproof glass. Her apartment building's elevator was out of service again. By the time she climbed 5 flights of stairs, she was winded, her hand automatically moving to her belly in a protective gesture. A yellow eviction notice was taped to her door. Inside, she collapsed onto her second-hand couch, the only decent piece of furniture she owned. The apartment was small but had once felt like an achievement. Her own place, decorated with flea market finds and photos of her parents. Emmanuel and Elaine Johnson had worked double shifts as a janitor and nurse to put her through school, believing education would give their daughter the opportunities they never had. Now, in the dim light of her apartment, Zoe stared at their photo on the side table. Her father had passed away during her sophomore year at Columbia, a heart attack at 58. Her mother was still working as a nurse in Queens, her body bent from decades of hard work. "What am I going to do?" Zoe whispered to the empty room. The following weeks became a blur of desperation. Each morning, Zoe scoured job listings, sending resumes to dozens of companies. The interviews that followed always started promisingly, her Columbia degree and solid work experience opening doors, but inevitably soured when her pregnancy became apparent. "We're looking for someone with long-term commitment," one interviewer said, eyes fixed on her midsection. "Our team works long hours, sometimes weekends," said another. By her 4th month, with rent now 4 months overdue and savings depleted, Zoe took drastic measures. She sold nearly everything she owned, her laptop, television, even her father's watch, keeping only essentials. She accepted 3 part-time jobs: morning receptionist at a veterinary clinic in Park Slope, afternoon waitress at a diner in Sunset Park, and freelance data entry work she did during the night hours. She slept 4 hours a night, ate the minimum necessary, and sent resumes between shifts. Her mother offered to help, but Elaine was barely making ends meet herself, sending money to relatives back in Jamaica. One Tuesday morning in her 6th month, Zoe sat in the crowded waiting room of a community clinic in Brooklyn for her prenatal checkup. Her feet were swollen from double shifts, her back aching from hours of standing. When the nurse practitioner frowned during the ultrasound, Zoe's heart skipped a beat. "Is something wrong with the baby?" "Just a moment," the woman said, calling for a doctor to confirm her findings. The doctor, a kind-faced woman with silver hair, squinted at the screen, then turned to Zoe with an expression of amazement. "Ms. Johnson, you're not having a baby, you're having 3. 3? Zoe repeated, not comprehending. "Identical triplets. See here?" The doctor pointed to the screen. 3 separate heartbeats. This is quite rare, especially naturally occurring identical triplets. The world seemed to tilt beneath her. One baby had seemed impossible enough. 3? How would she feed them? Where would they sleep in her tiny apartment, if she even still had an apartment by then? Later, sitting alone in the corridor after the appointment, Zoe felt tears streaming silently down her face. An older nurse with kind eyes sat down beside her. "Is there someone who can help you? Family? The father?" Zoe shook her head. "I'm alone, completely alone. How am I going to raise 3 children?" The woman squeezed her hand gently. "One day at a time, dear. One day at a time." Walking home, Zoe passed a newsstand with business magazines displayed prominently. Marcus Reynolds smiled from the cover of one, arm around a stunning blonde socialite. The headline read, "Reynolds heir to wed cosmetics heiress, the merger of the year." That night, in her nearly empty apartment where the heating worked only sporadically, Zoe made a decision as she caressed her now prominent belly. She wouldn't be just another statistic. She wouldn't be just another single mother struggling to survive. Marcus Reynolds had said she wasn't enough, that she had no value. She would prove him wrong, in every possible way. "You'll be proud of your mother," she whispered to her unborn sons. "And one day, the man who rejected us will swallow every word he said." She placed her hand firmly on her belly, feeling a kick, or was it 3, in response. She had no idea how she would manage, but she knew with absolute certainty that she would, not just survive, but thrive. Not just for herself, but for the 3 lives depending on her. As Zoe lay on her mattress on the floor, imagining how she would support 3 babies instead of 1, she couldn't possibly foresee that one day she would own a chain of luxury hotels where a single suite would cost more than Marcus's annual salary. As Zoe lay on her mattress on the floor, her mind raced with the impossible math of triplets. 1 baby had seemed daunting enough on her non-existent budget. 3 was unimaginable. The irony wasn't lost on her. Marcus had treated her pregnancy as a minor inconvenience to be erased with a check, while she now faced a challenge 3 times more overwhelming than she'd initially feared. The next morning, she dragged herself to an interview at a marketing firm in Midtown. The meeting had started promisingly. The interviewer impressed with her Columbia degree and previous experience. Zoe had worn a loose-fitting blouse that concealed her growing bump, but when the conversation turned to long-term commitment, she felt compelled to be honest. "I should mention that I'm expecting," she said, trying to sound confident. "But I'm extremely organized and dedicated. I plan to take minimal time off and—" The interviewer's expression shifted instantly. The warmth drained from her smile, replaced by professional detachment. "Oh, congratulations, that's wonderful." She shuffled some papers on her desk. "We actually have several candidates to consider, but we'll be in touch." Zoe knew what that meant. There would be no call back. Outside, the bitter January wind cut through her coat as she headed toward the subway. This had been her 5th rejection this week. Each time the same pattern, initial interest followed by polite dismissal once her pregnancy became known. No one would say it was discrimination, they were too careful for that. But the message was clear. A pregnant woman, especially one without a partner, was a liability. Back in her apartment, Zoe surveyed what remained of her possessions. She'd already sold her television, her laptop, most of her clothes, and the small collection of jewelry she'd inherited from her grandmother. Her bookshelf, once filled with college textbooks and novels, now held only a few cherished volumes. Her living room was nearly empty, the coffee table and side chairs already sold online to cover last month's rent. She opened her laptop, an ancient model she'd kept because it was worth more to her functioning than what she'd get selling it, and posted her dining table on Craigslist. The responses came quickly. By evening, a young couple had carried away the table, leaving behind $200 and an emptier apartment. "It's okay," she whispered to her belly. "We don't need much space anyway." The next morning, Zoe started her new job as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic in Park Slope. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but they hadn't asked questions when she'd applied. The clinic's manager, a harried woman in her 50s, handed her a binder of procedures. "Phones open at 8, close at 6. Lunch break is 30 minutes whenever you can fit it in. Any questions?" "No, Zoe swallowed hard, fighting a wave of nausea. Morning sickness, cruelly misnamed as it struck her throughout the day, had intensified with the triplets. "Bathrooms down the hall," the manager said, noticing her pallor. "Try not to make a habit of it. The phones need coverage." By 10 o'clock, Zoe had checked in 15 pets, fielded 30 calls, and rushed to the bathroom twice. She smiled through the dizziness, apologized to irritated clients for the wait, and tried to ignore the concerned looks from the veterinary technicians who clearly noticed her condition. At 3 o'clock, her shift ended. She had exactly 30 minutes to get to her next job. The public bathroom at the subway station was filthy, but Zoe had no choice. She changed quickly from her clinic polo shirt into the white button-up required for her waitressing job, careful not to let her clothes touch the grimy floor. Her feet already ached, and her lower back throbbed, but she couldn't afford to miss a shift. The diner in Sunset Park was hot, noisy, and perpetually understaffed. Zoe balanced plates up and down her arms, memorized complicated orders, and navigated between tightly packed tables. The other waitresses were mostly immigrants who spoke little English. They smiled sympathetically at her growing belly, but couldn't offer more than the occasional chance to sit down for a minute between rushes. "You should not be working so hard," whispered Magdalena, an older waitress from El Salvador, as they refilled salt shakers after closing. "Not good for babies." "I don't have a choice," Zoe replied, rubbing her back. "The father? He helps?" Zoe shook her head. "There is no father. Not anymore." Magdalena crossed herself. "3 babies need a village. You have family?" "My mother, but she works double shifts as a nurse. She can barely help herself." The subway ride home at 11 p.m. was a blur of exhaustion. Once home, Zoe forced herself to eat something, a peanut butter sandwich and a banana, before opening her laptop. Her third job, data entry for a medical billing company, waited for her. The mind-numbing work of inputting codes and numbers would take her until 3 a.m., at which point she'd collapse for 4 hours before starting the cycle again. The weeks blurred together. February turned to March, and her belly grew rapidly. The clinic manager frowned at her expanding waistline but said nothing, likely knowing how difficult it would be to replace someone willing to work for such low wages. At the diner, Magdalena and the other waitresses started giving her the less physically demanding stations, covering for her increasingly frequent bathroom breaks. The customers, seeing her condition, often left extra tips. One night, exhausted beyond measure, Zoe fell asleep at her laptop. She woke with a start at 5 a.m., panicked about the unfinished work. She'd just lost $50 of desperately needed income. Her back spasmed as she straightened, her feet so swollen they barely fit into her shoes. That morning, she counted coins from her tip jar to buy prenatal vitamins. The bottle cost $23, nearly 3 hours of work at the diner. She stared at her nearly empty refrigerator, calculating how long she could stretch her remaining food. The math was impossible. Something had to give. The local food bank operated out of a church basement 3 blocks from her apartment. Zoe had walked past it dozens of times, never imagining she'd need their services. Now, at 6 months pregnant with triplets, she stood in line with other desperate people. Elderly folks on fixed incomes, young mothers with toddlers, men with the hollow eyes of long-term unemployment. "Zoe? Zoe Johnson?" She froze at the familiar voice. Turning slowly, she faced Amanda Peters, her former colleague from the marketing agency. "Amanda, hi," Zoe managed, acutely aware of her worn clothes and the clear reason she was standing in a food bank line. "I volunteer here on Saturdays," Amanda explained, her eyes darting to Zoe's belly. "I didn't know you. How are you?" "I'm fine," Zoe lied, mustering what dignity she could. "Just a temporary situation." Amanda nodded too quickly, discomfort radiating from her. "Of course, let me help you get signed up." The humiliation burned worse than hunger. Zoe had once shared cocktails with Amanda at industry events, exchanged office gossip, collaborated on presentations. Now, Amanda's pity was palpable as she filled a box with canned goods, rice, and powdered milk. "There's a program for expectant mothers," Amanda said quietly. "Extra protein, fresh produce. Let me sign you up." "Thank you," Zoe whispered, pride long since surrendered to necessity. The following Thursday, Zoe sat in the crowded waiting room of Brooklyn Community Health Center. Her monthly checkup had been moved up when she'd called about increased discomfort. All around her, women in various stages of pregnancy waited, many looking as tired as she felt. "Johnson?" called a nurse. In the examination room, the ultrasound technician squinted at the screen, then called for the doctor. Zoe's heart raced. Had something happened to one of the babies? Dr. Williams, a kind-faced man with gray temples, studied the monitor intently. "Ms. Johnson, the babies are developing normally, but they're positioned in a way that's causing your discomfort. With triplets, space gets tight early." He pointed to the screen. "See here? 3 distinct heartbeats, 3 little ones growing well, but we need to monitor you more closely. Triplet pregnancies are high risk, especially identical ones." Zoe nodded, relief mingling with renewed anxiety. "What does that mean, practically speaking?" "More frequent appointments, possibly bed rest in the later stages. Your blood pressure is elevated, which concerns me." "Bed rest? Doctor, I work 3 jobs. I can't just stop." He looked at her with compassion but firmness. "Ms. Johnson, I understand your situation is difficult, but these babies are coming early. Triplets always do. If you don't reduce your stress and physical activity, we're looking at potential complications that could endanger all 4 of you." After the appointment, Zoe sat alone in the clinic corridor, tears streaming silently down her face. The reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. Not just 1 baby, but 3. Not just financial strain, but potential health risks. Not just single motherhood, but single motherhood times 3. An older nurse with kind eyes and silver hair sat down beside her. Her name tag read Eleanor. "Rough news?" she asked gently. "Triplets," Zoe said, her voice breaking. "Identical triplets. The doctor says I need more rest, fewer hours working. But if I work less, we don't eat. If I don't eat properly, the babies suffer. I can't win. Is there someone who can help you? Family? The father?" Zoe shook her head. "My mother works double shifts herself, and the father..." She laughed bitterly. "He made it very clear this was my problem." Eleanor's eyes flashed with indignation. "Some men don't deserve the title of father." She patted Zoe's hand. "How are you managing now?" "I'm not," Zoe admitted. "I'm completely alone, behind on rent, working around the clock. How am I going to raise 3 children?" The nurse squeezed her hand firmly. "One day at a time, dear. One day at a time." On her way home, Zoe passed a newsstand displaying business magazines. Marcus Reynolds smiled confidently from the cover of Forbes, the headline declaring him NYC's most eligible bachelor. The accompanying photo showed him at a charity gala, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by admiring socialites. His world couldn't be further from hers. That night, in her increasingly empty apartment where the heating worked only sporadically, Zoe huddled under her last remaining blanket. Her hand caressed her prominent belly, feeling the movements of the 3 lives growing inside her. "I don't know how we'll manage," she whispered to them, "but we will. I promise you that. And one day we'll build something so remarkable that the man who abandoned us will regret every word he said." As she drifted into exhausted sleep, she couldn't have known that in just a few years, that same man would see her name in a business publication and feel the first tremors of what would eventually become earth-shattering regret. The sharp ring of the hospital phone jolted Zoe awake in her uncomfortable chair. She had been dozing between contractions, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion after 18 hours of labor. At 34 weeks, her water had broken unexpectedly while she was filling salt shakers at the diner. Her manager had called an ambulance when Zoe doubled over, clutching her stomach as liquid pooled at her feet. "Triplets coming early," the paramedic had said into his radio, while Zoe, terrified and alone, had tried to reach her mother between waves of pain. Now, in the sterile delivery room, monitors beeped steadily around her. The contractions had intensified over the past hour, each one feeling like her body was being torn apart. Nurses bustled in and out, checking machines and her dilation. 7 centimeters, announced the most recent nurse. We're getting close. Is there someone we should call? Your partner? Zoe shook her head, biting her lip against another contraction. Just my mother. She's trying to get off her shift. The nurse nodded, sympathy in her eyes as she adjusted Zoe's IV. The neonatal team is standing by. With triplets this early, we want everyone ready. A particularly violent contraction seized Zoe, and she gasped, gripping the bed rails until her knuckles turned white. The fetal monitors began beeping faster. Baby A's heart rate is dropping, called the nurse, pressing the emergency button. Suddenly, the room filled with medical staff. Ms. Johnson, we need to move quickly, said Dr. Rivera, appearing at her side. Baby A is showing signs of distress. We're prepping for an emergency C-section. Everything happened in a blur. Zoe was wheeled into an operating room, bright lights blinding her as a mask was placed over her face. My babies, she whispered as the anesthesia took hold. Please save my babies. She awoke hours later in recovery, her body feeling hollow and strange. A nurse noticed her stirring and approached the bed. Ms. Johnson, you're in recovery. The cesarean went well. My babies? Zoe's voice was raspy, her throat sore from the breathing tube. They're in the NICU, neonatal intensive care. 3 boys, as you knew. They're very small, but they're fighters. Can I see them? As soon as you're stable enough to sit in a wheelchair, probably tomorrow morning. Tomorrow seemed an eternity away. Zoe drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain medication making time elastic. When she next opened her eyes, daylight filtered through the blinds, and her mother Elaine sat beside the bed, still in her nursing scrubs. Mom, Zoe whispered. Elaine leaned forward, taking her daughter's hand. I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry I couldn't get here sooner. 3 grandsons, Zoe. Your father would have been so proud. Have you seen them? Yes, they're tiny but perfect. You did good, girl. A nurse entered with a wheelchair. Ready to meet your sons? The NICU was a different world. Hushed voices, the soft beeping of monitors, the whooshing of ventilators. Zoe was wheeled to a corner where 3 incubators stood side by side, each containing a tiny red body covered in wires and tubes. Baby A is Joshua, the neonatal nurse explained, pointing to the first incubator. 4 pounds, 2 ounces. He had the roughest start but stabilized after we got him on the ventilator. Babies B and C are Jordan and Jaden, both just over 4 pounds. They're breathing with CPAP assistance rather than full ventilation. Zoe stared at her sons, overwhelmed by their fragility and the complexity of the medical equipment keeping them alive. Their translucent skin showed blue veins beneath. Their chests rose and fell in rapid, shallow breaths. Can I touch them? You can place your hands through these ports, the nurse demonstrated. Skin contact is beneficial, even through the incubator. Zoe reached into Joshua's incubator first, gently placing her finger against his tiny palm. Instinctively, his fingers curled around hers. Despite his size and the tubes helping him breathe, his grip was surprisingly strong. Hi, Joshua, she whispered, tears flowing freely. I'm your mom. You're going to be okay. All of you are going to be okay, I promise. The next 6 weeks became a blur of hospital and work. Zoe was discharged after 3 days, but the triplets remained in the NICU. She established a grueling routine, visiting the hospital at dawn to spend 2 hours with the babies before her shift at the veterinary clinic, returning during her lunch break to deliver pumped breast milk, working at the diner until closing, then spending the night hours sitting beside the incubators, often sleeping upright in an uncomfortable chair. You should go home and rest, urged Dr. Singh, the neonatologist, finding Zoe dozing beside Joshua's incubator at 3 in the morning. "The babies are stable. The nurses will call if anything changes." "I can't leave them," Zoe said, straightening. "They need to know I'm here." "And they need a mother who doesn't collapse from exhaustion," the doctor countered gently. "You're pumping milk every 3 hours, working multiple jobs, and barely sleeping. That's not sustainable." But Zoe persisted. She learned every medical term, tracked every gram of weight gain, memorized the patterns of each baby's heart monitor. She sang to them during kangaroo care sessions, their tiny bodies against her chest, and read children's books in whispers through the incubator ports. At work, she functioned on autopilot. Her clinic manager had reluctantly held her position, more from inability to find a replacement than compassion. The diner owner, however, had been unexpectedly kind, adjusting her schedule to accommodate hospital visits and allowing her to store pumped milk in the restaurant refrigerator. On a particularly exhausting night, as Zoe struggled to keep her eyes open while extracting milk in a hospital supply closet, her mother found her. "Zoe," Elaine said, taking in her daughter's hollow eyes and slumped posture. "This can't go on." "I don't have a choice, Mom. The boys need breast milk for their immune systems, and I need both jobs to afford the apartment." Elaine sat beside her, determination etched across her face. "I've made a decision. I'm taking early retirement." "What? Mom? No. You're only 58. Your pension will be reduced. It's enough. I can help with the boys when they come home so you can work, and my Social Security starts in 4 years. But your arthritis, your plans to eventually move back to Jamaica can wait. Right now, my grandsons and my daughter need me." Elaine's tone brooked no argument. "Your father would have done the same." 2 weeks later, Dr. Singh delivered the news they'd been waiting for. They're ready to go home. All 3 have reached 5 pounds and are maintaining their body temperature. Joshua's lungs have strengthened considerably. The day Zoe brought her sons home was both terrifying and joyous. The tiny apartment looked even smaller, with 3 second-hand cribs crowded into the bedroom. Each baby had color-coded caps and blankets, blue for Joshua, green for Jordan, yellow for Jaden, the only way to tell them apart at first glance. "We did it," Zoe whispered to her mother as they gazed at the sleeping triplets. "They're home." The reality of caring for 3 newborns hit like a tidal wave. The constant cycle of feeding, changing, and soothing was relentless. One would fall asleep just as another woke hungry. The apartment filled with the smell of formula, supplementing Zoe's breast milk, which couldn't keep up with 3 hungry boys, and the constant hum of the second-hand breast pump Zoe had purchased from a hospital lactation consultant. Elaine proved invaluable, taking the night shift so Zoe could sleep a precious few hours before her morning clinic job. During the day, while Zoe worked, Elaine cared for the triplets with the efficiency of an experienced nurse, keeping detailed notes on each feeding and diaper change. Even with Elaine's help, the logistics were overwhelming. Laundry became a constant battle, with 3 babies going through dozens of outfits daily. The tiny apartment's bathroom transformed into a drying room, with onesies and burp cloths hanging from every available surface. One morning at 4 a.m., Zoe found herself at the laundromat 3 blocks away, the triplets asleep in their stroller while she transferred wet clothes to the dryer. The only other customer, an elderly man sorting socks, watched curiously. "Triplets?" he asked, noting the 3 identical sleeping faces. Zoe nodded, too exhausted for conversation. "My sister had twins back in the 60s, he offered. "Toughest job in the world," she always said, "but worth it." Worth it? Zoe pondered those words as she folded tiny onesies. Despite the exhaustion, the financial strain, the moments of overwhelming doubt, yes, they were worth everything. Between feedings and her reduced work schedule, the diner job had been reluctantly sacrificed. Zoe found herself drawn to an idea that had formed during those long nights in the NICU. Watching the inefficiency of hospital scheduling systems, the difficulty families had finding reliable home care, the exorbitant agency fees that barely trickled down to actual caregivers, she envisioned a solution. While the triplets napped, Zoe set up a makeshift workspace in the corner of the living room. Her ancient laptop sat atop a cardboard box, surrounded by sticky notes covered in code snippets and workflow diagrams. During college, she'd taken coding classes as electives, fascinated by the logical problem-solving of programming. Now, those skills resurfaced as she mapped out a platform connecting service providers directly with clients. "What are you working on?" Elaine asked one afternoon, finding Zoe typing furiously while simultaneously rocking Jaden's bassinet with her foot. A platform that would let housekeepers, home health aides, and other service workers connect directly with clients. No agency taking 40% off the top, no exploitative contracts, just fair pay for honest work. Elaine studied her daughter's animated expression. "And you're building this yourself?" "Learning as I go. There are free resources online. I'm piecing together a prototype." Sundays became Zoe's development day. With Elaine taking the boys to church, Zoe had precious hours of uninterrupted work. She connected with online forums, watching tutorials and asking questions in coding communities. Slowly, her vision took shape in rudimentary code. By the time the triplets were 3 months old, Zoe had a basic prototype. She invited her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who worked as a housekeeper, to test the interface. "You see? You create a profile with your services, availability, and rates. Clients can book you directly. No middleman." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded slowly, navigating the simple interface. "And the client pays me directly, not through an agency?" "Exactly. The platform takes only a small percentage, enough to maintain the service, not to exploit workers." "Dios mío, this would change everything. The agency takes half of what clients pay, for doing nothing but a background check once." Word spread quickly among Mrs. Rodriguez's network. Soon, Zoe was hosting impromptu focus groups in her living room. Housekeepers, home health aides, dog walkers, all sharing stories of exploitation by agencies and enthusiastically testing her prototype. As the triplets reached their 6-month milestone, Zoe heard about a startup incubator program specifically for minority entrepreneurs. The program offered a small seed investment, mentorship, and access to potential investors. The application deadline was just 2 weeks away. "You should apply," Elaine urged. "This platform could help so many people." "The presentation is in person. Who would watch the boys?" "I will, of course. You've been working on this for months. It deserves a chance." The night before the presentation, Zoe rehearsed in the living room, one baby on her hip, another crawling at her feet, the third attempting to eat a throw pillow. Her makeshift presentation boards, poster board with printed screenshots, leaned against the wall. Home Connect revolutionizes home services by directly connecting providers with clients, she recited, bouncing Joshua gently while Jordan tugged at her pant leg. "Our platform eliminates exploitative middlemen while providing security and convenience for both parties." Jaden chose that moment to spit up spectacularly on the carpet. "Maybe this is crazy," Zoe sighed, setting Joshua down to clean the mess. "How can I run a startup with 3 babies?" Elaine, returning from the kitchen with bottles, shook her head firmly. "If you can manage triplets while working and developing this platform, you can do anything. Those judges will see that." The next day, wearing a borrowed blazer and with her hair professionally styled for the first time in months, a gift from Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, a cosmetology student, Zoe stood before the panel of 5 judges at the incubator program. "Home Connect addresses a critical market gap," she explained, advancing through her presentation slides with confidence born of conviction. "Service providers lose up to 50% of their earnings to agencies, while clients pay premium rates for inconsistent service. Our platform creates transparency, eliminates unnecessary costs, and empowers workers to control their own schedules and earnings." The questions came rapid fire: market size, competitive landscape, revenue model, technology infrastructure. Zoe answered each precisely, her months of research evident in her command of the subject. Then came the question she'd been dreading: Ms. Johnson, asked the only woman on the panel, your background is impressive, but I have to ask, how would you manage a startup as a single mother of triplets? The demands of early-stage companies are enormous. The room fell silent. Zoe took a deep breath. The same principles that allow me to raise 3 babies simultaneously while working and developing this prototype will make me an exceptional founder. Extreme efficiency, resilience, and the absolute refusal to accept failure as an option. She gestured to her presentation. Every line of code in this prototype was written during naps or after bedtime. Every market analysis was conducted with at least 1 baby on my lap. I've learned to maximize every minute, to work through exhaustion, to solve problems with limited resources. Isn't that exactly what successful founders do? A slow smile spread across the woman's face. 2 weeks later, Zoe received the call. Home Connect had been selected for the incubator program with an initial investment of $50,000. As Zoe signed the initial investment contract for her fledgling platform, no one could have imagined that this would be the first step toward a technology empire that one day Marcus Reynolds would beg to be associated with. 3 years had passed since that life-changing day when Zoe had signed the initial $50,000 investment contract for Home Connect. Her cramped apartment now buzzed with activity that had nothing to do with the normal chaos of raising triplets. Where a dining table had once stood, 3 computer monitors displayed analytics dashboards and development environments. The kitchen counter doubled as a mailing station for marketing materials. The living room wall was covered with sticky notes, wire frames, and a meticulous growth strategy flowchart. Zoe maneuvered through this controlled chaos while balancing Joshua on her hip, the phone pressed between her ear and shoulder as she spoke to a potential client. Yes, Mr. Harrington, we can absolutely customize the interface to match your building's aesthetic. Our team has experience with luxury properties similar to yours. She glanced at Jordan and Jaden playing with wooden blocks on the floor, their dark curls bouncing as they built and demolished tiny towers. I can send over our portfolio this afternoon. Would that work for you? After hanging up, she set Joshua down with his brothers and quickly typed notes into her CRM system. At 3 years old, the triplets were bundles of energy and curiosity. Joshua, the analytical one, methodically sorted his blocks by color. Jordan, the communicator, narrated an elaborate story about their block city. Jaden, the creative spirit, had abandoned the blocks entirely to bang rhythmically on an overturned pot. 5 minutes, boys, then breakfast, Zoe promised, finishing her notes. The apartment door opened as Elaine returned from her morning walk carrying grocery bags. Those delivery men are here again. 3 more boxes. New promotional materials, Zoe explained, taking a bag. We're pitching to Lexington Arms next week. Home Connect had evolved significantly since its incubator days. What began as a simple platform connecting housekeepers with clients had expanded to include a comprehensive service management system for residential buildings. The team had grown too. 3 full-time developers worked remotely, along with a part-time marketing coordinator and a UI designer. Maya's calling in 10 minutes for the development update, Zoe said, pouring cereal for the boys. Can you make sure they eat while I take that? Elaine nodded, already wiping Jaden's sticky hands. You had another email from Lux Properties, 4th one this month. Zoe paused, a flicker of excitement crossing her face. They're persistent. Lux Properties manage 12 high-end residential buildings across Manhattan, catering to the elite. Their interest in Home Connect had been unexpected but validating. After 3 years of grinding, building the business client by client, a contract with Lux would be transformative. Later that morning, after her call with Maya, Zoe opened the email from Lux Properties. Ms. Johnson, our executive team would like to discuss implementing Home Connect across our portfolio. Please join us this Thursday at 2 p.m. at our headquarters in the Empire State Corporate Center, 47th floor. Regards, Gregory Williams, Operations Director, Lux Properties. Zoe stared at the screen, her heart suddenly pounding. The Empire State Corporate Center, the 47th floor. The same building, the same floor where Marcus had humiliated her 3 years ago, where he had told her she wasn't enough, that she didn't belong in his world, as he offered money to make her disappear. "Everything okay?" Elaine asked, noticing her daughter's expression. "Lux Properties wants a meeting, at their headquarters." "That's wonderful!" "It's in the Empire State Corporate Center." Understanding dawned on Elaine's face. "Oh, on the 47th floor," Zoe added, her voice hollow. "The same floor? Different company, same floor. Lux leases space there too." Zoe closed the laptop, her mind racing. "I don't know if I can go back there." Elaine sat beside her, taking her hands. "Listen to me. You are not the same woman who walked into that building 3 years ago. You're the CEO of a growing company. You're the mother of 3 beautiful boys. You've built something from nothing. But what if I freeze? What if all those feelings come rushing back? Then you acknowledge them and continue anyway. That's what you've been doing for 3 years." That evening, after putting the boys to bed, Zoe stood before her closet, surveying its meager contents. Most of her clothes were practical, washable, durable items suited to chasing toddlers and working from home. Nothing appropriate for a high-stakes meeting with luxury property executives. 2 days later, she found herself at a designer consignment shop in Brooklyn Heights. The saleswoman, noting Zoe's uncertainty, approached with a professional smile. "Looking for something specific?" "A business suit. Something for an important meeting with luxury real estate executives." The woman assessed Zoe with a practiced eye. "Budget? $300. It was more than she could afford. Money that should go toward next month's server costs or the boys' preschool deposit. But this meeting demanded investment. After trying several options, Zoe settled on a navy blue tailored suit with subtle pinstripes, previously owned by someone with considerably more money than herself, but now within her stretched budget. The saleswoman added a silk blouse in cream that complemented Zoe's warm skin tone. "You look powerful," the woman noted as Zoe examined herself in the mirror. "These executives won't know what hit them." The night before the meeting, Zoe rehearsed her presentation while Elaine observed, offering feedback. They had arranged for Mrs. Gonzalez from downstairs to watch the boys during the meeting, an additional expense, but necessary. "Remember to emphasize the savings," Elaine suggested. "Luxury clients still care about the bottom line." "And the resident satisfaction metrics," Zoe added, flipping to that slide. "That's their primary concern." "You're ready," Elaine said confidently. "Those people will see exactly what you're worth." Thursday arrived with merciless speed. Dressed in her consignment suit, hair pulled into a sleek bun, Zoe kissed her sons goodbye and headed for the subway. Each stop brought her closer to the confrontation with her past that she'd been dreading and preparing for. The Empire State Corporate Center loomed before her, its glass facade reflecting the spring sunshine. Zoe paused on the sidewalk, memories threatening to overwhelm her. The last time she'd stood here, she'd been pregnant, vulnerable, hopeful that Marcus would support her. She'd left broken and alone. "Not today," she whispered to herself, squaring her shoulders. "Today I walk in as an equal." The elevator ride to the 47th floor was a study in controlled breathing. When the doors opened, Zoe stepped into a reception area significantly different from Reynolds Developments. Where Marcus's company had favored dark woods and masculine leather, Lux Properties opted for sleek minimalism, white marble, glass, and chrome. "Zoe Johnson for Gregory Williams," she announced to the receptionist, her voice steady. "Ms. Johnson, welcome," the young man replied, standing to greet her. "The team is waiting in conference room A. May I offer you water or coffee?" This simple courtesy, being offered a beverage rather than watching Marcus pour himself whiskey without consideration for her, struck Zoe forcefully. "Water would be perfect, thank you." She was escorted to a glass-walled conference room where 4 people sat around a polished table. Gregory Williams, a distinguished man in his 50s, rose to greet her. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for coming. We've heard impressive things about Home Connect." One by one, he introduced his colleagues. the head of resident relations, the technology director, and the chief financial officer. Zoe shook each hand firmly, maintaining eye contact, reminding herself that she belonged at this table. As she set up her presentation, Zoe couldn't help but glance toward the corner of the floor where Reynolds Development had once been located. A different company occupied that space now, the Reynolds logo long gone. The knowledge provided unexpected relief. "Before I begin," Zoe said, standing at the head of the table, "I'd like to understand your specific pain points. What aspects of resident services cause the most friction currently?" This approach, starting with their needs rather than launching into her pitch, visibly impressed Williams. For the next hour, Zoe led a discussion that showcased her deep understanding of property management challenges and demonstrated how HomeConnect's platform could address each one. "Our residents expect white glove service," explained Miranda Chen, head of resident relations. "But coordinating multiple service providers is a logistical nightmare. How would your system handle that complexity?" Zoe brought up a specific slide. HomeConnect was built precisely for this challenge. Each resident has a personalized portal where they can schedule services, provide specific instructions, and rate their experience. On the management side, you have complete oversight of all activities, with real-time updates and analytics. The technology director leaned forward. "What about integration with our existing systems?" "We've developed flexible APIs specifically for enterprise clients," Zoe replied, noting his surprise at her technical knowledge. "Here's an example of our implementation at the Wellington in Boston, where we integrated with 3 legacy systems." As the meeting progressed, Zoe felt a transformation occurring. The painful memories of this building receded, replaced by the confidence of presenting a solution she knew was valuable. These executives weren't seeing a desperate pregnant woman from Brooklyn, they saw a capable CEO with a product that could solve their problems. When the CFO, a skeptical woman with sharp eyes, asked, "How can a startup your size guarantee consistent service for our premium properties?" Zoe was ready. "Because we understand what truly defines premium service, not just technology, but personalized attention. Large corporations promise this, but rarely deliver. At HomeConnect, we're small enough to care about each client's specific needs, but sophisticated enough to provide enterprise-level solutions." The answer resonated. Williams exchanged glances with his team, a silent communication that Zoe recognized as positive. "Ms. Johnson, we're impressed," Williams said finally, "particularly with your focus on both resident experience and operational efficiency. We'd like to move forward with a pilot program in 2 of our buildings." Zoe maintained her professional composure, but inside, elation soared. "That sounds excellent. I can have a proposal to you by Monday with implementation timelines." "Make it 3 buildings," the CFO interjected. "The West Side Tower has been particularly problematic. Let's see if your system can handle our most demanding residents." By the time Zoe left the Empire State Corporate Center, the contract parameters were established. A 6-month pilot across 3 luxury buildings, with an option to expand to all 12 properties based on performance metrics. The potential value exceeded 6 figures, HomeConnect's largest contract by far. Standing on the sidewalk where she had once left in tears, Zoe now felt a profound sense of reclamation. She had returned to the scene of her deepest humiliation and emerged victorious on her own terms. That evening, Zoe returned to Queens, entering their new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom they had moved into 6 months earlier when the business began showing consistent revenue. The triplets swarmed her legs as she entered, Elaine following with an expectant expression. "They want us," Zoe announced, setting down her briefcase. 3 buildings to start, potential for all 12 in their portfolio. Elaine's face lit up with pride. "I knew it. I knew they would see what I see." The boys, not understanding the significance but feeding off the excitement, jumped around her. "Mommy happy," Jordan declared, his limited vocabulary capturing the essence perfectly. Later, After bedtime stories and tucking the triplets into their room, a real bedroom with 3 small beds, not cribs crammed into a corner, Elaine brought out a small cupcake with a single candle. "What's this for?" Zoe asked. "To celebrate homecoming," Elaine replied enigmatically. "You went back to that place not as a victim, but as a conqueror. You've come full circle." The next morning, Zoe hosted a video call with her small but growing team, raising paper cups of coffee to toast their success. "This is just the beginning, everyone. Lux Properties is our foot in the door to the luxury market. From here, we scale." As she observed her 3 sons playing peacefully in their new home, secure and thriving, Zoe couldn't know that in just 5 years, her disruptive business model would attract a 9-digit venture capital investment, putting her on the covers of the same magazines that glorified Marcus Reynolds. As Zoe observed her 3 sons playing peacefully in their new home, a notification pinged on her phone. Home Connect had just been featured in Tech Innovator magazine as one of the startups to watch. 5 years had passed since that pivotal meeting at the Empire State Corporate Center, and the trajectory of her life had bent sharply upward with each passing year. The Home Connect offices now occupied an entire floor in a modern building in Long Island City, with 30 employees bustling between glass-walled meeting rooms. The platform had expanded to 3 states, serving hundreds of residential buildings and thousands of service providers. But Zoe, ever restless, had begun to see limitations in their current model. "Mom, Jordan took my tablet again." Joshua's voice broke through her thoughts. At 8 years old, the triplets remained identical in appearance but had developed distinct personalities that sometimes clashed spectacularly. "I just needed to check something," Jordan defended, clutching the device. "My Mandarin lesson starts in 5 minutes." "You have your own tablet," Joshua countered, reaching for it. "Boys," Zoe intervened, her voice calm but firm. "Joshua, you know we share in this family. Jordan, please ask next time." Jaden, observing the exchange from the piano where he'd been practicing, shook his head. "You guys always argue about the same things." The spacious Upper West Side apartment was a far cry from the cramped Queens unit they'd occupied 3 years earlier. With 3 bedrooms, a dedicated office space for Zoe, and a baby grand piano for Jaden's growing musical talent, it represented the physical manifestation of Home Connect's success. Elaine, now settled into grandmother life, entered with a tray of healthy snacks. "Who's ready for a break?" "Jaden, that Chopin piece is coming along beautifully." "Thanks, Grandma. My teacher says I might be ready for the Youth Symphony audition next month." Zoe checked her watch. "Boys, finish your snacks. We need to leave for the airport in 20 minutes. The triplets' eyes lit up simultaneously. "We're really going to Miami? For a whole week?" Jordan asked, his argument with Joshua instantly forgotten. "Yes, but remember, it's partly work for me. The Palmetto Resort wants to discuss integrating our system. This would be their first real vacation, a mix of business and pleasure that Zoe had carefully arranged after 3 years of relentless work building Home Connect. The boys had never seen the ocean outside of New York, had never stayed in a luxury hotel. Despite their comfortable life now, Zoe remained frugal, investing profits back into the business rather than on extravagances. The Palmetto Resort in South Beach exceeded even Zoe's expectations. Their suite overlooked the turquoise Atlantic, palm trees swaying below their balcony. The triplets raced from room to room, marveling at the marble bathroom larger than their first apartment's kitchen, the massive television embedded in the wall, the welcome basket filled with tropical fruits and gourmet chocolates. "Can we go to the pool now?" Jaden asked, already changing into swim trunks. "As soon as I finish this call," Zoe promised, setting up her laptop at the desk. 20 minutes tops. While the boys explored the suite under Elaine's supervision, Zoe connected with her COO back in New York. "The integration proposal is ready for tomorrow's meeting," she confirmed. "I've reviewed the Palmetto's current systems. They're running 3 separate platforms that don't communicate with each other. Classic inefficiency." After her call, Zoe changed into a modest one-piece swimsuit and led her family to the resort's main pool. The triplets plunged in immediately, their swimming lessons at the YMCA paying off as they confidently navigated the water. Zoe settled into a lounge chair, a rare moment of relaxation as she watched her sons play. "Quite the energetic bunch," remarked a middle-aged man settling into the chair beside hers. "Triplets, right? I can see the resemblance." "Yes," Zoe answered, instantly on guard as she was whenever strangers approached her children. "I'm Richard Mercer," he offered, extending his hand. "I own this place. Well, this and 3 other properties in the area." Zoe's professional instincts engaged immediately. "Zoe Johnson, Home Connect. We have a meeting scheduled with your operations team tomorrow." Recognition flashed across his face. "You're the tech platform people? I wasn't expecting—" He caught himself. I thought you'd be male, older, white?" Zoe supplied with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mercer had the grace to look embarrassed. "Guilty as charged. Our industry remains frustratingly homogeneous." He glanced at the triplets splashing in the shallow end. "And you travel with your family? That's refreshing." "My sons are part of everything I do," Zoe replied simply. As they conversed, Zoe couldn't help but notice the inefficiencies around them. Pool attendants scrambled to fulfill drink orders, communication breaking down between the bar and service staff. A guest requested fresh towels 3 times before receiving them. The check-in line at the front desk had grown to 12 people, faces showing increasing frustration. "Your staff seems stretched thin," she observed carefully. Mercer sighed heavily. "Our biggest challenge. South Beach is booming, but finding and retaining quality staff is nearly impossible. Plus, our technology is a patchwork of systems that don't talk to each other." "That's exactly what Home Connect solves," Zoe began, then caught herself. "Sorry, force of habit. I'm supposed to be on vacation." "No, please." Mercer leaned forward. "I'd rather hear it informally first. How would your platform help a property like this?" For the next hour, as the triplets tired themselves out in the pool, Zoe outlined how Home Connect could revolutionize the Palmetto's operations, streamlining staff communication, automating routine tasks, creating accountability for service requests, all while enhancing the guest experience. "The fundamental problem with most hospitality systems," she explained, "is that they're designed around administrative convenience, not service delivery. We flip that model." Mercer listened with growing interest. "You're speaking my language. But implementing new tech across a property this size, it's daunting. We handle the entire transition, including staff training. Most importantly, we can integrate with your existing systems rather than replacing everything at once." By the time the triplets emerged from the pool, hungry and sun-kissed, Mercer had scrapped the formal meeting scheduled for the next day. "Have dinner with me tonight instead. Bring the family. We'll discuss this further in a setting that doesn't waste your vacation time." That evening, dining on the resort's terrace restaurant, Zoe watched her sons charm the owner with their precocious conversation. Joshua explained how he'd noticed inefficiencies in the pool service workflow. Jordan impressed Mercer by ordering in perfect Spanish from the waitstaff. Jaden asked thoughtful questions about the live music ensemble playing nearby. "Remarkable young men," Mercer commented as the boys excused themselves to watch the musicians up close, Elaine accompanying them. "You've clearly done something right." "They're my greatest achievement," Zoe acknowledged, watching them with pride. "So tell me," Mercer lowered his voice, "what would it take to implement Home Connect across all 4 of my properties?" The question caught Zoe off guard. She'd expected to start with just the Palmetto. "That would be a significant undertaking. We'd need to—" "I know it would be significant. That's why I'm asking." He tapped his water glass thoughtfully. "I've been in this business 30 years, Ms. Johnson. I recognize transformative potential when I see it. Your platform isn't just about efficiency. It's about fundamentally reimagining service delivery." By the time dessert arrived, they had outlined preliminary terms for a partnership that would extend far beyond what Zoe had anticipated. But as she lay in bed that night, watching her sons sleep in the adjoining room of their suite, a bigger idea began to form. The next morning, while the boys explored the beach with Elaine, Zoe made a series of calls to her executive team in New York. "I'm seeing an opportunity that goes beyond our current model," she explained to her COO. "Not just providing software to hotels, but potentially acquiring and transforming properties with our approach." Her team was skeptical but intrigued. By the time the vacation ended, Zoe returned to New York with not only a signed contract for all 4 Mercer properties, but a vision that would eventually become Johnson Hospitality, a division focused on revolutionizing hotel operations through technology. 3 months later, Zoe stood in her expanded offices, now spanning 2 floors, presenting this vision to her leadership team. HomeConnect has proven that connecting service providers directly with clients creates efficiency and value. Now we apply that same principle to the hospitality industry as a whole. Her CTO raised a practical concern. Development costs for a hotel-specific platform would be substantial. We'd need additional investment. "Already in progress," Zoe confirmed. 3 venture capital firms have expressed interest based on our current growth metrics. Working evenings and weekends, Zoe spearheaded the development of the hospitality platform while maintaining HomeConnect's core business. The triplets, now in a prestigious school for gifted children, often did homework in the corner of her office, absorbing business concepts as naturally as their academic subjects. The pilot implementation at Mercer's properties exceeded all expectations. Staff turnover decreased by 40%. Guest satisfaction scores rose dramatically. Energy costs dropped through smarter room management. Most importantly, revenue increased as operational efficiency improved. "You've created a competitive advantage I didn't know was possible," Mercer told Zoe during a follow-up visit 6 months later. "My properties are outperforming the market by double digits." Word spread quickly through the industry. Soon, hotel owners from across the country were contacting HomeConnect, eager to implement the system that was transforming Mercer's properties. It was during this period of rapid expansion that Zoe learned about a struggling hotel in South Beach, the Royal Palms, once a glamorous destination but now facing foreclosure. During a video call with her CFO, she studied the property details. "The bones are good," she noted. "Prime location. Historical significance. Their financial problems stem from mismanagement and outdated systems." "Are you suggesting we acquire a client about to go bankrupt?" her CFO asked incredulously. "I'm suggesting we acquire a distressed asset with tremendous potential, implement our system, and demonstrate the full power of our approach." The resistance she faced from potential investors was predictable. In a sleek conference room overlooking Manhattan, Zoe presented her acquisition proposal to a group of venture capitalists. "A black woman with no hospitality management experience wants our money to buy a failing Miami resort?" one partner summarized skeptically, leaning back in his chair. Zoe met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm not asking you to bet on a hotel. I'm offering the chance to invest in the digital revolution of hospitality, with numbers already proven in our existing implementations." Her data was irrefutable. The projected returns, based on performance metrics from the Mercer properties, spoke for themselves. By the end of the meeting, skepticism had transformed into cautious interest. 6 weeks later, Zoe signed the acquisition documents for the South Beach Palms, her first owned property. Standing in the lobby with its faded grandeur, she envisioned what it would become. Not just a profitable hotel, but a showcase for how technology could transform hospitality. That evening, Zoe hosted a small celebration dinner in their Upper West Side apartment. The triplets clinked their juice glasses against her sparkling water, each already developing ideas for the hotel's transformation. The check-in process could be fully automated, Joshua suggested, always the systems thinker. "We should offer language services for international guests," Jordan added. "I could help develop the translation protocols." Jaden, thoughtful as always, considered the broader impact. "If we make this work, you could buy more hotels, right, Mom?" "One success at a time," Zoe smiled, though her mind was already racing ahead to the possibilities. Later, after the boys were asleep, Elaine joined Zoe on the balcony overlooking the city lights. "Your father would be bursting with pride," she said softly. "From assistant to hotel owner in 8 years." "With a lot of help," Zoe acknowledged, squeezing her mother's hand gratefully. As the boys excitedly discussed how they would transform the newly acquired resort, Zoe couldn't imagine that 8 years later she would own a global network of luxury hotels, including a property that would become the setting for her reunion with Marcus Reynolds. The sleek helicopter with the understated Johnson Enterprises logo cut through the Manhattan skyline, banking slightly as it approached the landing pad atop the Johnson Tower. Inside, Zoe scrolled through quarterly reports on her tablet while her personal assistant recited the day's schedule. The Johnson Foundation board meeting at 11, followed by lunch with the sustainable energy investors. "The Tokyo team needs your approval on the design modifications by 3, and your son's school called to confirm you'll attend their science competition tomorrow." Zoe nodded, glancing at her watch, a subtle Patek Philippe that had been a gift to herself when Johnson Hospitality acquired its 10th property. 4 years had passed since she purchased the struggling South Beach Palms, transforming it into the cornerstone of what had become a hospitality empire. "Any word from the Dubai investors?" she asked, setting aside the tablet. "They've increased their offer to $300 million for a 30% stake. CFO recommends we counter at 22%. The helicopter touched down, and Zoe straightened her Armani jacket before disembarking. At 42, she had evolved into a woman of polished sophistication, her wardrobe now exclusively designer pieces, her natural hair styled in an elegant crown that complemented her flawless makeup. The awkward assistant who once trembled in Marcus Reynolds' office was unrecognizable in this confident CEO. The executive floor of Johnson Enterprises hummed with purposeful activity. 200 employees now worked across 5 cities, the company having expanded far beyond its original home services platform. As Zoe strode through the open workspace, employees straightened imperceptibly, offering respectful nods. The expansion numbers from Chicago exceeded projections by 17%, her CFO reported, falling into step beside her. And the green tech integration is reducing operational costs across all properties by an average of 23%. Excellent. What about the Aspen acquisition timeline? On schedule for the winter opening, the renovation team is implementing all the sustainability features you requested. Zoe entered her corner office, a tasteful space of warm woods and cool blues, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city she had once viewed only from below. On her desk sat 3 framed photos of the triplets at various ages, from toddlers to their current 12-year-old selves. Her phone buzzed with a video call from Joshua. Smiling, she accepted immediately. "Mom, you've got to see this," her son exclaimed, his face alight with excitement. The camera panned to show a complex digital model rotating on his computer screen. "I've optimized the energy consumption algorithm. Initial tests show it could reduce hotel HVAC costs by another 14%. "That's impressive," Zoe replied, genuine pride warming her voice. "Send it to Dr. Patel for review. If it tests well, we'll implement it in the Aspen property first." At 12, Joshua had already developed 2 proprietary algorithms used across the Johnson properties. His mathematical genius had emerged early, but rather than sequestering him in advanced programs away from his brothers, Zoe had encouraged practical applications that kept the triplets together. After ending the call, Zoe reviewed the final plans for the Aspen Lodge, the company's most ambitious project to date. The former ski resort had been purchased in foreclosure, its dated facilities and financial mismanagement making it available at a fraction of its potential value. Under Johnson Hospitality, it would be reborn as an ultra-luxury, sustainable mountain retreat. Later that afternoon, Zoe toured the expanded technology division on the 38th floor, where developers were fine-tuning the 7th generation of the platform that had started in her tiny apartment. What began as Home Connect had evolved into an integrated ecosystem of applications that managed everything from room temperature preferences to staff scheduling, guest experience to energy optimization. "We've incorporated Joshua's previous algorithm into the standard build," the development director explained, demonstrating the interface. Early results from the Miami properties show a 26% reduction in energy consumption without any impact on guest comfort. And the mobile guest experience? Launching next month. Guests can control every aspect of their stay from their phones: temperature, lighting, dining reservations, spa appointments, even chatting directly with their preferred staff members. As evening approached, Zoe helicoptered to Aspen for the final inspection before the grand opening scheduled for the following week. The transformation of the property was nothing short of remarkable. The dated Alpine Lodge had been reimagined as a sleek, sustainable luxury destination without losing its mountain charm. The grand ballroom buzzed with activity as staff prepared for the exclusive opening gala. 200 VIP guests would attend. Celebrities, politicians, business leaders, all eager to experience the newest Johnson property and be seen at the social event of the season. "Ms. Johnson," the event coordinator approached, tablet in hand, "we've had an additional 20 requests from various publications for press access. The Forbes team is particularly interested in featuring the property in their sustainability issue." "Approve Forbes and the environmental publications," Zoe decided. "Limit the tabloids to the approved list we discussed." As she inspected the final details, Zoe's phone lit up with another video call. This time all three boys crowded into the frame, their faces virtually identical but their expressions distinctly individual. "Mom, we won!" Jordan announced, his voice cracking with excitement. "First place in the state science competition. We're going to nationals next month." "The judges said our clean energy distribution model could have real-world applications," Joshua added, pushing his glasses up his nose. "And I didn't even pass out during the presentation this time," Jaden quipped, earning playful shoves from his brothers. "I'm so proud of you three," Zoe beamed. "We'll celebrate when I'm back tomorrow. Did you thank your grandmother for helping with the project?" "Of course," they chorused. At 12, the triplets had grown into handsome young men with their mother's warm complexion and determination, coupled with intelligence that continually astounded their teachers and mentors. Later that evening, as Zoe finalized details for the opening gala in her penthouse suite, her assistant mentioned a development that momentarily froze her composure. The editor from Fortune called again. "They're quite persistent about that cover story. From single mother to billion-dollar CEO, the Zoe Johnson story." Zoe set down her tablet, her expression thoughtful. For years, she had maintained a careful professional distance in media coverage, focusing on her business achievements rather than her personal journey. The world knew she had built her empire as a single mother of triplets, but she had never shared the full story of their beginning, of rejection, abandonment, and the man who had once deemed her insufficient. "Tell them I'll consider it," she finally replied. "Send over their proposed angle and interview questions." The following morning, Zoe observed the final preparations for the gala from the terrace of her suite. Below, staff meticulously arranged ice sculptures and floral displays around the heated outdoor pool area. Inside, chefs prepared sustainable gourmet offerings featuring local ingredients. Every detail reflected the Johnson brand: luxury with conscience, exclusivity with purpose. "Ms. Johnson?" Her assistant appeared at the terrace door. "The triplets' school called. Harvard's early admission program representatives will be visiting next month and specifically requested to meet your sons." "Harvard?" Zoe turned, surprise evident in her voice. "They're only 12. Apparently, the admissions director saw their research presentation at the Young Scientists Summit. They're considering them for the accelerated admission track, though they couldn't formally enroll until they're 15. Pride swelled in Zoe's chest. Her sons, whom she had raised alone in poverty and hardship, now stood at the threshold of opportunities beyond even her ambitious dreams for them. They had never known their father, never felt his absence as a loss. She had surrounded them with positive male influences, her Uncle Martin, who, despite his advancing age, remained actively involved in their lives, mentors like Dr. Williams, who had guided their education since they were 6, coaches and teachers who provided examples of integrity and excellence. The gala that evening was a triumph by any measure. Celebrities posed for photographers against the backdrop of the illuminated mountain. Politicians networked discreetly in corner seating areas. Business leaders exchanged cards and promises of collaboration. At the center of it all stood Zoe, resplendent in a custom gown, navigating conversations with the easy confidence of someone who belonged unquestionably in these rarefied circles. "Your vision for sustainable luxury is revolutionary," remarked a prominent hotel investor, champagne flute in hand. "The industry has been talking about these concepts for years, but you've actually implemented them profitably." "Sustainability and profitability aren't mutually exclusive," Zoe replied. "Our energy initiatives reduced operational costs by 37% across all properties last year, while our guest satisfaction scores increased." As the evening progressed, Zoe was approached by Thomas Ellison, editor-in-chief of Fortune. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for considering our proposal. Your story is remarkable, building a billion-dollar enterprise while raising triplets alone. It would inspire countless entrepreneurs, particularly women and minorities." Zoe considered his words carefully. "My hesitation has always been about maintaining my children's privacy. We completely understand. The focus would be on your business journey, with only the personal elements you're comfortable sharing." Later that night, as the gala wound down, Zoe stood alone on the main terrace, watching snowflakes begin to fall against the dark mountainside. Her empire had expanded beyond anything she had imagined that night in her nearly empty apartment, promising her unborn sons that they would have reason to be proud of their mother. 2 weeks later, Zoe sat for the Fortune photo shoot on the terrace of the Johnson Tower in Manhattan. The triplets stood beside her, poised and confident in tailored suits that mirrored her own polished appearance. The skyline stretched behind them, a city that had once seemed to have no place for a pregnant assistant from Brooklyn. "Tell me about the early days," the interviewer asked once the photographer had captured the perfect shots. "What was the biggest challenge in starting Home Connect while raising triplets alone?" Zoe chose her words carefully, sharing enough of her struggle to be authentic without exposing the full pain of her abandonment. "I was pregnant and suddenly unemployed, facing the prospect of raising 3 children alone. Many people would have seen only obstacles, but I saw motivation, 3 perfect reasons to create something sustainable." "And the children's father?" "Not every man is prepared for parenthood," Zoe replied diplomatically. "I made the decision to focus forward rather than dwell on absence." The article, published the following month, catapulted Zoe into a new level of public recognition. The Extraordinary Rise of Zoe Johnson: How a Single Mother of Triplets Built a Billion-Dollar Empire, became Fortune's most read cover story of the year. The photograph of Zoe with her sons, 3 handsome, identical young men with their mother's determination evident in their eyes, circulated widely online and in print. In a Midtown Manhattan office, Marcus Reynolds froze when the magazine landed on his desk, coffee cup suspended halfway to his lips. The woman on the cover was nearly unrecognizable from the vulnerable assistant he had dismissed years ago, but there was no mistaking her. And there, standing proudly beside her, were 3 young boys with faces that struck him like physical blows, each one bearing unmistakable traces of his own features blended with Zoe's. His coffee cup crashed to the desk, dark liquid spreading across the glossy cover as the magnitude of what he had lost began to dawn on him. While Zoe had built an empire and raised 3 exceptional sons, his own career had plateaued, his family's once prestigious development company having been sold to competitors after financial difficulties. The magazine revealed not just Zoe's success, but the existence of 3 sons he had never known. Sons who now stood poised to inherit a business empire that dwarfed anything the Reynolds name had ever achieved. And as the coffee seeped through the pages, obscuring the faces of the family he had rejected, Marcus Reynolds began to formulate a plan to insert himself into the life of the woman who had once not been enough for him. While Zoe signed documents to acquire Green Tech Innovations for $50 million, expanding her empire into sustainable technology, she had no idea that the Fortune magazine revealing her story was now in the trembling hands of the man who had once discarded her and her sons as insignificant. The Fortune magazine in Marcus Reynolds' shaking hands felt heavier than its physical weight warranted. He stared at the 3 young faces beside Zoe, feeling as though he'd been punched in the stomach. Their features, the sharp jawline, the distinctive arch of their eyebrows, the set of their eyes, mirrored his own with uncanny precision, softened only by Zoe's warmer coloring and gentle curve of her smile. "Sir?" His assistant's voice broke through his daze. "Your 10 o'clock is waiting." "Cancel it," Marcus said, not looking up from the magazine. "Cancel everything today." 2 years had passed since that moment, and Marcus's obsession had only grown. Now, at 48, he sat in his increasingly sparse office, staring at the latest quarterly report for his struggling fintech company. Reynolds Fintech had shown early promise after he'd pivoted from the family real estate business, but recent setbacks had spooked investors. The numbers on the screen painted a grim picture. Another 17% drop in valuation, 3 major backers threatening to pull out, cash reserves dwindling. His phone rang, Catherine from Investor Relations, undoubtedly with more bad news. "They're rejecting our counterproposal," she confirmed, not bothering with pleasantries. "Horizon Capital wants 40% for their $20 million, or they walk." "That's highway robbery," Marcus snapped, running a hand through his hair, now threaded with distinguished silver at the temples. "We were valued at $75 million just 6 months ago." "And now we're not," Catherine replied bluntly. "The market knows we're desperate, Marcus. We need that capital injection before the quarter ends, or the board will force a restructuring." Translation: he would lose control of his company. After ending the call, Marcus pulled open his desk drawer and removed a thick file, one not related to Reynolds Fintech. The label read simply, "Johnson." Inside was a comprehensive dossier compiled by Parker Investigations over the past 2 years, tracking the lives and achievements of Zoe Johnson and her sons. The material was exhaustive: newspaper clippings, social media screenshots, corporate filings, school records, even surveillance photos taken at public events. Through these pages, Marcus had watched from afar as Joshua, Jordan, and Jaden grew from the boys in the Fortune photograph into exceptional young men on the cusp of 15. The latest addition to the file was a glossy brochure from Harvard's early admission program, which all 3 boys were rumored to be entering next fall, at 15, 3 years ahead of their peers. Marcus ran his finger over Joshua's face in a group photo, noting how the boy's confident stance and analytical expression mirrored his own at academic competitions decades earlier. His office phone buzzed again. "Mr. Reynolds, there's a Mr. Parker here to see you." Marcus quickly closed the file. "Send him in." Samuel Parker entered, a nondescript man whose forgettable appearance served him well in his profession. "I have the weekly update," he said, placing a USB drive on the desk. "And something else you'll find interesting." "Go on." "The Johnson Enterprises is acquiring the Palm Springs Resort. The deal closes next week." Marcus froze. "Palm Springs Resort? I tried to buy that property 8 months ago." Parker nodded. "You were outbid by Sunset Holdings, which turns out to be a shell company controlled by Johnson Enterprises. They're planning a grand reopening gala next month with 200 VIP guests." Marcus leaned back, processing this information. The Palm Springs Resort had been a target he'd pursued aggressively when seeking to diversify his investments. The owner had ultimately accepted a competing offer nearly double his, an amount he'd considered financially unsound. Now it made sense. Zoe had been the mysterious buyer. "There's more," Parker continued. "Johnson Enterprises is diversifying into fintech services for the hospitality industry. They're evaluating potential partners for payment processing solutions." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Do you have the short list?" "Better. I have the invitation list for the Palm Springs Gala. Financial technology partners are among the VIP guests." For the first time in months, Marcus felt a surge of genuine hope. Ensure Reynolds FinTech gets on that list, whatever it takes. After Parker left, Marcus stood at his office window, gazing at the Manhattan skyline that had once symbolized his birthright as a Reynolds. His family's development company had owned prime real estate across the city for 3 generations before financial missteps, some his own, had forced them to sell to competitors. Reynolds FinTech represented his attempt to rebuild, to prove he could succeed without the family legacy. Now, that too was slipping away. Unless he could secure a partnership with Johnson Enterprises. The symmetry was almost poetic, seeking salvation from the woman he had once cast aside, the mother of his unknown children. At home that evening, Marcus reviewed the dossier again, focusing on personal details about the triplets. Joshua, the eldest by 2 minutes, had developed a revolutionary algorithm for energy efficiency already implemented across the Johnson Hotel properties. Jordan spoke 5 languages fluently and led humanitarian initiatives through the Johnson Foundation. Jaden combined musical prodigy status with a brilliant analytical mind. All 3 bore the Johnson name. No mention of Reynolds anywhere in their public profiles. His phone chimed with a text from his fiancée, Charlotte Winthrop, heiress to a Boston banking fortune. "Dinner at Le Bernardin at 8. Daddy wants to discuss wedding investments." Marcus texted a quick confirmation, his mind elsewhere. His engagement to Charlotte had been as much strategic as romantic. The Winthrop connection provided financial stability and social rehabilitation after the Reynolds company's decline. The wedding, scheduled for August, would merge 2 old-money families in a socially advantageous alliance. Charlotte knew nothing of his past with Zoe, nothing of the 3 boys who shared his DNA. 2 weeks later, an elegantly embossed invitation arrived at the Reynolds FinTech office. "Johnson Enterprises cordially invites you to the grand reopening gala of the Palm Springs Resort. As a leader in financial technology innovation, your presence is requested for a special preview of our integrated hospitality payment systems." Marcus held the invitation like it was made of delicate crystal. Parker had succeeded in getting him on the list, likely through connections at the event planning company handling the gala. "Your quarterly review with the board is scheduled for the same weekend," his assistant reminded him when he requested travel arrangements. "Reschedule it," Marcus ordered. "This is potentially our largest client opportunity this year." In the days leading up to the gala, Marcus prepared meticulously. He researched every aspect of the Johnson Enterprises technology ecosystem, identifying perfect integration points for Reynolds FinTech's payment solutions. He had his tailor create a new tuxedo, spent hours at his exclusive barber, and even consulted a communication coach on how to project authority and confidence despite his company's weakened position. What he couldn't prepare for was the emotional impact of potentially seeing his sons in person for the first time. On the afternoon before the gala, Marcus found himself parked across from Westridge Academy, the exclusive Manhattan private school the triplets attended. School was letting out, and students streamed through the ornate gates in their distinctive navy blazers. Then he saw them. 3 identical figures walking together, backpacks slung over shoulders, moving with the easy confidence of young men who had never known rejection or abandonment. Even from a distance, their resemblance to him was striking, though softened by Zoe's features. Joshua gestured animatedly, clearly explaining something complex to his brothers. Jordan laughed at whatever was said, clapping Jaden on the shoulder. They moved as a unit, the bond between them palpable even to a distant observer. Marcus gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. These were his sons, his flesh and blood, walking past without the slightest awareness of his existence. Sons who had grown from infants to teenagers without ever knowing their father, who called themselves Johnson with no knowledge of their Reynolds heritage. Sons who, according to Parker's research, were already being groomed to eventually lead different divisions of Zoe's business empire. The black SUV that pulled up for them was discreet but clearly expensive, with a security detail that suggested the boys' value to their mother. As they climbed in, laughing about something only they understood, Marcus felt an emotion he couldn't immediately identify, something beyond jealousy or regret, something closer to grief for a life he could have had. The Palm Springs resort glittered like a jewel in the desert twilight as Marcus arrived the following evening. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a faded property with untapped potential now embodied sophisticated luxury with sustainable touches. Living walls of desert plants framed the entrance, while subtle solar technology integrated seamlessly into the architecture. A discreet sign announced, "A Johnson Enterprises property." Inside, the gala was already underway. 200 of the business world's elite mingled in the grand ballroom, which opened onto a spectacular desert garden illuminated with thousands of tiny lights. A string quartet played in one corner, while servers circulated with champagne and sustainable seafood canapes. Marcus accepted a glass of champagne, scanning the room for Zoe. Instead, his gaze landed on 3 young men in matching blue suits greeting guests near the main entrance. His sons, more polished than they had appeared outside their school, but unmistakably the same boys. Joshua spoke confidently to a group of investors, explaining something that had them nodding with interest. Jordan conversed in what sounded like fluent Japanese with a delegation from Tokyo. Jaden charmed an elderly woman who, according to the dossier, was a significant philanthropist supporting music education. Marcus stood frozen, champagne halfway to his lips, overwhelmed by the sight of them up close. They carried themselves with the assurance of young men who had been raised to believe in their own value, a stark contrast to the children he had imagined would result from Zoe's unplanned pregnancy. Impressive young men, aren't they? Marcus turned to find an older gentleman beside him, following his gaze toward the triplets. Very, Marcus managed. You know them? Everyone knows the Johnson boys, the man chuckled. Prodigies, all 3. Their mother has raised them remarkably well, especially considering she did it entirely on her own. The pointed comment made Marcus wonder if his interest had been too obvious, but before he could respond, a hush fell over the room. Zoe Johnson had arrived. She entered wearing a stunning white structured gown that highlighted her athletic figure, her natural hair styled in an elaborate updo adorned with subtle diamond pins. The transformation from the nervous assistant he had dismissed 15 years ago was absolute. This woman radiated power, confidence, and unassailable success. As she made her way through the crowd, people instinctively made space, board members and celebrities alike angling for a moment of her attention. Her smile was genuine but measured, her handshakes firm, her conversation precise. The 3 boys gravitated toward her, forming a striking family unit that photographers eagerly captured. The message was clear to everyone present. This was a dynasty in the making, with Zoe as its formidable matriarch. When she took the microphone to welcome guests and officially open the resort, Marcus found himself moving closer, drawn by some magnetic need to hear her voice again. The Palm Springs Resort represents our commitment to reimagining luxury through sustainability and innovation, she declared, her voice confident and melodious. Like all Johnson properties, it stands as proof that exceptional experiences need not come at the expense of our planet or our communities. As she continued outlining the property's features and the company's vision, her gaze swept the room, and for a heart-stopping moment landed directly on Marcus. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, the briefest tightening around her eyes, before she smoothly continued her speech without missing a beat. She had seen him. recognized him, and revealed nothing. The room applauded enthusiastically as she concluded, and the party resumed its elegant flow. Marcus stood rooted in place, unsure of his next move. The carefully rehearsed pitch for his payment technology seemed suddenly inadequate, even absurd. While Marcus remained paralyzed by indecision, Zoe moved through the crowd with purpose, stopping to speak with key partners and investors. She was working the room with practiced efficiency, and he realized with growing anxiety that she might deliberately avoid him all evening. Taking a steadying breath, Marcus began navigating toward her, only to be intercepted by a young man, Jordan, according to the matching green pocket square that subtly distinguished him from his brothers. "Excuse me, sir, are you Marcus Reynolds of Reynolds FinTech?" the boy asked with impeccable politeness. Marcus nearly dropped his champagne flute. Yes, I am. I read about your adaptive payment authentication system in Bloomberg last week. Very innovative approach to fraud prevention." Marcus stared into the face of his son who had no idea of their connection, and struggled to find his voice. "Thank you. That's very observant of you." "Our technology team is evaluating several payment solutions," Jordan continued professionally. "Would you be interested in discussing potential synergies?" The surreal nature of the moment nearly overwhelmed Marcus. His son was speaking to him as a business prospect, with no knowledge that half his DNA came from the man before him. "I would be very interested," Marcus finally managed, his voice steadier than he felt. "Excellent. Let me introduce you to my brothers. We each focus on different aspects of the business." As Marcus followed Jordan through the crowd toward his other sons, he caught sight of Zoe watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. In that moment, he understood with perfect clarity that she had orchestrated this encounter, sending her son to approach him as a business contact, establishing the terms of their interaction. The message was unmistakable. In Zoe Johnson's world, Marcus Reynolds was nothing more than another potential vendor, his past significance erased entirely. While Marcus was being led toward a meeting with the sons who didn't know he was their father, he couldn't possibly anticipate that the real confrontation with Zoe would shatter whatever illusions he still harbored about easy reconciliation with the family he had once rejected. As Jordan led Marcus through the crowded ballroom, the weight of the moment pressed upon him with physical intensity. His son, his biological son who had no idea of their connection, walked slightly ahead, navigating the glittering crowd with practiced ease. Marcus studied the boy's profile, noting the unmistakable Reynolds jawline, the same determined set of the shoulders that Marcus had inherited from his own father. "Joshua Jaden," Jordan called as they approached his brothers, who were engaged in conversation with what appeared to be technology executives from Singapore. "This is Marcus Reynolds of Reynolds FinTech. He's developed that authentication system I mentioned." Both boys turned simultaneously, and Marcus felt a visceral shock at being confronted with three nearly identical versions of himself at 15, albeit with Zoe's warmer complexion and expressive eyes. The triple impact was disorienting. "Mr. Reynolds," Joshua extended his hand first, his grip firm and confident. "I've been analyzing your blockchain approach to payment verification. The distributed validation model is quite innovative." "Thank you," Marcus managed, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm impressed you understand the technical aspects. Most executives twice your age struggle with the concept." "Our mother believes in practical education," Jaden explained, offering his own handshake. "We each focus on different aspects of the business, but we all understand the fundamentals." Marcus couldn't help but notice the pride in their voices when they mentioned their mother. These weren't entitled rich kids coasting on a parent's success. They were active participants in building something they believed in. "Speaking of fundamentals," Joshua continued, "we're evaluating several payment platforms for integration across our properties. Would you be interested in presenting your solution to our technology team tomorrow?" "Absolutely," Marcus replied, seizing the opportunity. "I'd be happy to walk through how our system could integrate with your guest experience platform." The conversation flowed with surprising ease as the boys asked incisive questions about transaction security, international payment regulations, and integration architecture. Marcus found himself genuinely impressed by their knowledge and poise, and haunted by the thought that he had contributed nothing to their remarkable development. "You three seem exceptionally well-versed in business for your age," he observed carefully. Jordan smiled. "Our mother involves us in real decisions. She says there's no better education than actual responsibility." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Marcus said, his throat tightening. "She is," Jaden agreed with immediate loyalty. "She built everything from nothing while raising us." The weight of those words, "from nothing," struck Marcus like a physical blow. He knew exactly what nothing had entailed. The pregnant woman he had dismissed with a check and cruel words. From across the room, Zoe watched the interaction with outward calm that belied her inner tension. She had deliberately sent Jordan to make contact, establishing the terms of engagement on her territory. The boys knew nothing of their biological father's identity, and she intended to maintain control of that information until she decided otherwise. "Quite the gathering of power players," a familiar voice observed beside her. Zoe turned to find Elaine, elegant in a midnight blue gown, her silver hair styled in a sophisticated updo. At 73, Zoe's mother remained a striking presence and her most trusted confidant. "He's talking to the boys," Zoe said quietly. Elaine's eyes narrowed as she located Marcus across the room. "Are you okay with that?" "I sent Jordan over. Better to establish the boundaries immediately." "Always the strategist," Elaine smiled tightly. "The governor is trying to catch your attention, by the way. Third attempt in the last 10 minutes. Zoe nodded and moved smoothly toward the politician, her white gown creating a path through the crowd as guests instinctively made way. Years of navigating these social waters had perfected her ability to project approachable authority. As the evening progressed, Zoe delivered her second brief address to announce the Johnson Foundation's new initiative, an educational program for disadvantaged youth interested in sustainable hospitality. The triplets joined her on stage, each speaking confidently about different aspects of the program they had helped design. Under the spotlights, the family resemblance between the boys and Marcus became even more pronounced to anyone who might be looking for it. But most guests saw only the Johnson dynasty, a remarkable mother and her equally remarkable sons, united in purpose and vision. Marcus watched from the crowd, a complex mixture of emotions churning within him. Pride at the evident intelligence and poise of the sons he had never known. Envy of the bonds they shared with Zoe. Regret for his own short-sightedness 15 years earlier. And beneath it all, a growing determination to establish some connection, however limited, with these young men who carried his blood, but not his name. As the formal presentations concluded and guests returned to mingling, Marcus finally saw his opportunity. Zoe had momentarily separated from her entourage, examining a living wall installation near one of the terraces. With his heart pounding, he approached. "Zoe." She turned, her expression perfectly controlled. If not for the briefest tightening around her eyes, he might have thought she didn't recognize him at all. Marcus Reynolds. What a surprise. Her voice was cool, professional, the tone one might use with a distant business acquaintance. "You look incredible," he said, the prepared speech he'd rehearsed for days evaporating. "This empire you've built. Thank you. We're very proud of what we've accomplished." The subtle emphasis on "we" was not lost on him. "I've just been speaking with your sons. They're extraordinary young men." "They are," she agreed, her expression softening slightly at the mention of the triplets. "The greatest achievement of my life." Marcus gathered his courage. "Zoe, I need to tell you that—" "Mom," Jordan appeared at her side, interrupting whatever Marcus had been about to say. "The governor asked if we could take a photo with him for the environmental education campaign." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs as he looked at the boy up close, a perfect younger version of himself, but with Zoe's warm coloring and expressive eyes. "This is Jordan, my middle son," Zoe introduced with perfect composure. "Jordan, this is Marcus Reynolds, CEO of FinTech Solutions. Our departments are considering some potential partnerships." The boy extended his hand with impeccable manners. "Pleasure to meet you, sir. I read about your company in Bloomberg last week." "The pleasure is mine," Marcus managed, shaking the hand of his son who had no idea who he was. Seeking to prolong the interaction, he added, "You have other children besides this brilliant young man?" "Yes, 3 boys, identical triplets," Zoe replied with a serene smile. "All about to enter Harvard on the early admission program. Jordan, why don't you call your brothers to meet Mr. Reynolds?" Minutes later, Marcus found himself surrounded by 3 identical teenagers, each speaking knowledgeably about their interests and achievements. The surreal quality of the moment, standing in casual conversation with sons who had his DNA but no knowledge of their connection to him, left him feeling almost dizzy. "Joshua developed an algorithm that reduced our property's energy consumption by 42%, Zoe explained with evident pride. "Just building on existing frameworks," Joshua said modestly. "The real innovation was in applying machine learning to predict usage patterns. And Jordan speaks 5 languages fluently," Zoe continued. "He's leading our expansion negotiations in Asia." 6 languages now, Jordan corrected. "I added Mandarin last year." "Jaden combines his musical gifts with financial acumen," Zoe finished. "He's performed with 3 symphony orchestras while also developing our investment strategy for sustainable technologies." Marcus listened, increasingly aware of all he had missed. First steps, first words, school performances, countless moments that could never be reclaimed. "You must be very proud," he said to Zoe, the inadequacy of the words painful even as he spoke them. "Every day," she confirmed, her expression softening as she looked at her sons. "Boys, could you check if Mr. Takahashi has arrived?" He wanted to discuss the Tokyo expansion. When the young men had moved away, Zoe's demeanor changed instantly, the warmth evaporating from her eyes. "What do you want, Marcus? Why are you here?" "I searched for you for years," he began, the rehearsed explanation finally finding voice. "When I finally discovered about you, about them." "Discovered what exactly?" Her smile was glacial. "That the insignificant girl from Brooklyn built an empire? That the woman who wasn't enough for you is now worth over $4 billion? Zoe, I made the worst mistake of my life. I was young, scared." "Young?" Her eyebrow arched incredulously. "You were 32, Marcus, CFO of a family company. I was 27 and pregnant with your sons. Sons you said were my problem. I can explain. In fact, you can," she interrupted, gesturing toward the stage where an assistant was adjusting the microphone. "I'm making another brief address in 5 minutes. Why don't we go up together? I'm sure everyone would love to hear about our connection." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "Zoe, please, we don't need to make this public. We can talk privately, like adults." "Like adults? How interesting that you've adopted this new approach." She took a sip of water from a crystal glass. "You know what's most fascinating, Marcus? Throughout all these years, you never once tried to find out if I kept the pregnancy. Never checked if you had a child in the world, until you realized I'd become someone who might be useful to you. That's not... 3 years ago, when your company started gaining traction, you discovered me in Fortune. Your private detective wasn't as discreet as you thought. Since then, you've been trying to make contact, sending emails to my office, attempting to schedule business meetings. You only became truly persistent when your last investment round failed and you needed capital." Marcus paled further. "How do you know all this?" "I know everything about your current financial difficulties, your inflated valuation, the promises you can't deliver to investors. You need $30 million by the end of the quarter or you lose control to the board." One of her assistants approached discreetly. "Ms. Johnson, we're ready for your second address." Zoe nodded, and then looked directly into Marcus's eyes. "Perhaps you're wondering if I'm going to publicly humiliate you now. Expose the man who abandoned a pregnant woman carrying triplets, who said she wasn't enough, who threw money on the table as if she were disposable trash." Marcus grasped her arm desperately. "Zoe, please, take your hand off me," she said quietly, but with an authority that made him comply instantly. "I'm not going to expose you, Marcus. Do you know why? Because you're not important enough to be part of my narrative. You don't merit the time I'd waste mentioning your name." With that, she walked toward the stage with unshakable elegance. Marcus watched, disoriented, as she delivered a brief speech about the future of sustainable hospitality and announced a scholarship program for disadvantaged youth interested in technology and hospitality careers. "And now, I'd like to officially introduce the young ambassadors of the Johnson Foundation for Opportunity, my sons Joshua, Jordan, and Jaden Johnson." The three teenagers joined her on stage to enthusiastic applause. Under the spotlights, their resemblance to Marcus was even more evident, but no one except him seemed to notice, as everyone knew only Zoe as the single mother who had built an empire. "These extraordinary young men are my greatest pride and motivation. Raising them alone while building this company taught me that our limitations are only temporary when we have purpose." The crowd gave a standing ovation. Celebrities took photos. Billionaire CEOs nodded in approval. Marcus remained motionless, feeling the devastating weight of reality. He was nothing in this world, less than nothing. A financially failing man of multiple defeats, observing from a distance the family that could have been his. The morning after the gala, Marcus sat on the terrace of his luxury suite at the Palm Springs resort, the desert sun already warming the air despite the early hour. He stared at the headlines on his tablet, each one hammering home the magnitude of what he had lost. Johnson Enterprises acquires Palm Springs Resort for $870 million. Prodigy triplets meet the heirs to the Johnson Empire. Zoe Johnson announces Asian expansion with $1.2 billion investment. And most devastating, FinTech Solutions faces liquidity problems, shares drop 28%. The article detailed how investors were losing confidence in his company following unfulfilled promises and speculation about his ability to raise additional capital. The timing couldn't have been worse. Last night's humiliation at the gala still burned fresh in his mind. Zoe's cold dismissal, the boys' polite indifference, the realization that he was utterly irrelevant in their world. His phone vibrated with an incoming call. Charlotte's name flashed on the screen. His fiancée had been texting increasingly frantic messages since yesterday, when she'd seen photos from the gala circulating online, images that included Marcus speaking with three teenage boys who bore an unmistakable resemblance to him. He let the call go to voicemail. How could he explain to Charlotte that he had three 15-year-old sons? How would he admit that he had abandoned their mother, a woman who now controlled more wealth than Charlotte's entire family combined? After a restless night punctuated by dreams of three identical boys walking away from him down endless corridors, Marcus had made a decision. He would confront the situation head-on, appeal directly to Zoe for a second chance, not at romance, but at some role, however small, in his sons' lives. He composed a carefully worded message requesting a private meeting. To his surprise, Zoe responded within minutes, instructing him to meet her at the heliport in 1 hour. The sleek Johnson Enterprises helicopter lifted off from the resort's private pad exactly on schedule. Marcus sat stiffly across from Zoe, who was absorbed in reviewing documents on her tablet, barely acknowledging his presence. Gone was the evening gown from the previous night, replaced by designer jeans and a simple white shirt that somehow looked more expensive than his entire wardrobe. "Where are we going?" he finally asked, as the helicopter banked east, flying deeper into the desert. "Somewhere private," she replied without looking up. "This conversation shouldn't happen where my sons might overhear." After 30 minutes of flight, they descended toward a secluded Mediterranean-style villa nestled against dramatic rock formations. The property was surrounded by discreet security, its grounds immaculately maintained despite the harsh desert environment. They landed on a private helipad, and Zoe led him to a terrace overlooking a breathtaking vista of canyon and sky. A staff member silently delivered water and withdrew, leaving them completely alone. "I'll be direct, Marcus," Zoe said, settling into a chair with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in her own skin. "What do you hope to achieve with this sudden reappearance?" "To know my sons," he answered, the rehearsed eloquence he'd planned dissolving into simple truth. "To be part of their lives. To explain—" "Explain what?" she interrupted, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of tightly controlled anger. "That you abandoned their mother when she needed you most? That you considered them an error, a problem? I was a different person then, Zoe. Immature, arrogant. And now?" Her eyebrow arched skeptically. "Now you're on the verge of bankruptcy with 3 billionaire heirs who don't know you exist." Marcus felt blood rush to his face. "This isn't about money." "No?" Her laugh held no humor. "Your investors are abandoning ship. You have 6 weeks until you lose control of your company. Your wedding to Charlotte Winthrop is scheduled for August, a strategic alliance with a family that could save your finances." "How do you know all this?" he asked, genuinely startled by the depth of her intelligence. "I do my homework, Marcus. I always have." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling cornered. "Fine. Yes, I'm in difficulties. But when I discovered about the boys, something changed in me. I realized everything I'd lost, not just financially." "They don't need you," Zoe stated matter-of-factly. "They have mentors, teachers, male figures who've loved them since birth. My Uncle Martin, my cousin David, professors like Dr. Williams who's guided them since they were 6. They have complete lives." "But I'm their father," Marcus insisted, leaning forward. "Biologically, yes. In every other aspect that matters? No. A father is present. A father sacrifices. A father puts his children above himself." Her voice remained controlled, but her eyes flashed with suppressed emotion. "You're a sperm donor who once told me I wasn't enough for someone like you." The words hit him like physical blows. In the distance they heard laughter, the unmistakable sound of teenage boys enjoying themselves. Marcus turned to see the triplets playing volleyball on a private beach area below the terrace, accompanied by several friends who appeared to be visiting. "They seem happy," he observed quietly. "They are happy," Zoe confirmed. "They've always been happy. I made sure of it." "Do they know about me?" Marcus asked, the question he'd been dreading but needed to ask. "They know their biological father wasn't ready for parenthood, that I chose to raise them alone rather than have someone who didn't value them in our lives. I've never lied to them. And if I wanted to legally—" "Don't finish that sentence," Zoe cut him off, her tone suddenly sharp. "Any legal action would reveal your documented rejection. I have the check you offered me, unsigned. I have witnesses. I have 15 years of complete and voluntary absence. You never sought to know if they existed until you realized I had become successful. Do you really want to make that public?" Marcus looked away, defeated. The legal threats he'd considered in his darkest moments would only expose his abandonment to scrutiny, potentially turning his sons against him forever. "What do you want from me, Zoe?" "Absolutely nothing. That's what you don't understand." She gestured to the spectacular property around them. "I've built a life where we need nothing from you in any aspect. This isn't revenge, Marcus. It's indifference. You simply aren't necessary." A discreet staff member appeared at the edge of the terrace. "Ms. Johnson, the representatives from Dubai have arrived for the video conference. I'll be there in 5 minutes." She turned back to Marcus as the assistant withdrew. "Our conversation is over. I'll have them take you back." "And the boys? Can I at least meet them formally?" Zoe studied him for a long moment. "That would be their decision, not mine. They're 14, almost 15. They're brilliant young adults capable of making their own choices. If you want, I can inform them about your existence and let them decide if they want to meet you." "You'd do that for me?" Not for you. For them. Because they deserve all the truth and the freedom of choice that I always had. As the helicopter lifted off, Marcus watched the property diminish in the distance. Below, Zoe walked along the beach toward her sons, his sons, who greeted her with animated hugs. The scene was the perfect image of a complete, happy, successful family. A family he could have had. Back in his hotel room, Marcus poured himself a scotch with trembling hands. The conversation with Zoe had stripped away his remaining illusions. She didn't hate him. That might have been easier to combat. She simply didn't need him. Worse, his sons had grown into exceptional young men without his input, guidance, or love. He opened his laptop to find an email from Charlotte, the subject line stark. Explain these photos. Attached were images from the gala with circles drawn around the triplets' faces, then side-by-side comparisons with Marcus's own publicity photos. The resemblance was undeniable. Before he could formulate a response, his phone rang. The board chairman calling about the accelerating investor exodus. Whatever explanation he gave Charlotte would have to wait. Days passed in a blur of crisis management. The Palm Springs Gala had been his last best hope for securing a partnership that might save Reynolds FinTech. Instead, he returned to New York to face increasingly hostile board meetings and Charlotte's ultimatum. Explain the boys or return the engagement ring. He did neither, avoiding her calls while desperately pursuing alternative investors. The market's reaction was brutal, another 12% drop in share value after a key investor publicly pulled out. 2 weeks after the gala, Marcus was startled by an email notification on his phone. The sender, Zoe Johnson. With shaking fingers, he opened it. As promised, I told the boys about you. They have questions, naturally, but are open to a supervised meeting if and when they feel ready. Meanwhile, I've attached an investment proposal from Johnson Ventures. This isn't charity. We do this with promising companies in temporary difficulties. The terms are standard. You'll maintain 40% and operational control. This offer exists independently of any personal relationship with the boys. They are separate matters. The decision is yours. Marcus stared at the screen, tears silently tracking down his face. The proposal was fair, even generous. It would save his company, but he would never again be the majority owner. He would forever be the man who needed to be rescued by the woman he had abandoned. And as for the sons, even if they eventually accepted him, he would always be the stranger who entered their lives late. The man who rejected their mother. The man who lost everything that truly mattered through pride and arrogance. While Marcus contemplated the fragments of his shattered pride in New York, Zoe was signing documents for the Asian expansion in her Los Angeles headquarters. The triplets sat around the boardroom table, absorbing the business their mother had built, eagerly discussing how they would contribute to its future growth. For Zoe Johnson, the best revenge had never been planning Marcus's downfall. It was simply living extraordinarily well without him, building something so magnificent that his absence became a footnote rather than a defining tragedy, and teaching her sons to do the same. 2 weeks after the meeting at Zoe's desert villa, Marcus sat at his desk in Manhattan, staring at her email for the 100th time. The attached investment proposal from Johnson Ventures glowed on his screen. A professional, dispassionate document that would save his company while simultaneously cementing his diminished status forever. 40% ownership, operational control but with oversight, regular reporting to Johnson Ventures board representatives. His phone buzzed with yet another call from Charlotte. 3 days ago, she had left a tearful voice message demanding an explanation about those boys she'd seen in photos from the Palm Springs Gala. The resemblance was undeniable. His own features reflected in 3 handsome teenagers standing proudly beside Zoe Johnson, the woman Charlotte had never heard him mention. Marcus rejected the call. What could he possibly say? That 15 years ago he had callously abandoned a pregnant woman who went on to raise triplets alone while building a multi-billion-dollar empire. That he had offered money for an abortion and declared her not enough for someone like him? That the sons who should bear his name instead carried the name of the woman he had discarded? His office door opened without a knock. Catherine, his head of investor relations, entered with a grim expression. Horizon Capital is out. Completely. They're issuing a statement at market close citing irreconcilable strategic differences. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. That's the third major investor this month. Fourth, she corrected. Pinnacle Partners quietly liquidated their position yesterday. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. Marcus, they're going to vote on leadership changes. Translation: he was about to lose control of the company he had built from the ashes of his family's real estate business. What are our options? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Catherine gestured to his computer screen where Zoe's email remained open. That Johnson Ventures offer is our only lifeline. Have you responded yet? I'm still considering the terms. What's to consider? She asked, exasperation breaking through her professional veneer. Without capital injection by end of quarter, we're done. The Johnson terms are better than we deserve in our position. After Catherine left, Marcus opened his desk drawer and removed the diamond ring Charlotte had returned via courier that morning. The accompanying note was brief. When you're ready to explain who those boys are, call me. Until then, we're done. His personal and professional lives were collapsing simultaneously, the carefully constructed facade of success crumbling to reveal the hollow core beneath. And all because of a decision made 15 years ago, when he had looked at a pregnant Zoe Johnson and seen only an inconvenience rather than the remarkable woman she would become. The television on his office wall was tuned to CNBC, where Zoe's face suddenly appeared. The caption read, "Johnson Enterprises announces $1 2B Asian expansion." She spoke confidently about new properties in Tokyo, Singapore, and Dubai, outlining a vision that made Marcus's struggling fintech company seem like a corner store operation by comparison. Johnson Enterprises continues to lead the industry in sustainable luxury hospitality, she stated with quiet authority. These new properties will set global standards for energy efficiency while delivering unparalleled guest experiences. As the segment ended, Marcus's phone chimed with an email notification. This one wasn't from Zoe, but from an address he didn't recognize. Joshua. Johnson, Johnson Enterprises. Com. His heart raced as he opened it. Mr. Reynolds, following our mother's disclosure regarding your biological connection to my brothers and me, we would like to arrange a meeting in a neutral setting to formally make your acquaintance. While we appreciate this information may be significant to you, please understand that we approach this matter with measured expectations. We suggest the private dining room at Lucian's this Thursday at 7 o'clock evening. Please confirm if this arrangement is suitable. Regards, Joshua Johnson. The formality of the email, from a 15-year-old boy to his biological father, was both heartbreaking and fitting. These weren't ordinary teenagers. They were the Johnson heirs, raised by an extraordinary mother to be poised, cautious, and self-possessed. Thursday arrived with excruciating slowness. Marcus selected his finest suit, spent an hour at his barber, and arrived at Lucian's, an exclusive Manhattan restaurant known for its discretion, 30 minutes early. The maitre d' escorted him to a private dining room with a view of Central Park, elegant but not ostentatious. At precisely 7 o'clock, the door opened, and 3 identical young men entered. Without Zoe present, they moved with slightly less confidence, but their bearing still reflected their exceptional upbringing. All 3 wore navy suits that Marcus recognized as bespoke Savile Row, not flashy but of impeccable quality that most observers wouldn't appreciate. Mr. Reynolds, Joshua extended his hand, taking the lead as the eldest. Thank you for coming. Thank you for suggesting this meeting, Marcus replied, shaking each boy's hand in turn, trying to memorize the subtle differences between them. Joshua's firm handshake and analytical gaze, Jordan's diplomatic smile and perceptive eyes, Jaden's artistic hands and emotional expressiveness. After they were seated and had ordered, the boys choosing with the sophistication of those raised around fine dining, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. "I imagine you have questions," Marcus finally said. "Several," Joshua confirmed. "Most importantly, why did you abandon our mother when she told you she was pregnant?" The directness of the question shouldn't have surprised him, but it still landed like a physical blow. These boys hadn't come for pleasantries. Marcus began, then stopped himself. The rehearsed explanation suddenly seemed hollow. "The truth is that I made the worst mistake of my life. I was arrogant, selfish, and frightened. There's no justification for what I did." The triplets exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Did you offer her money to abort us?" Jordan asked, his tone clinically curious rather than accusatory. Marcus swallowed hard. "Yes. It's the most shameful thing I've ever done." "Mathematically speaking," Joshua said, "you've missed 5,475 days of our lives. That represents 99.8% of our existence thus far." The precision of the calculation, so like something Marcus himself would have done at that age, made the loss even more tangible. "Our mother never spoke badly of you," Jordan continued, surprising Marcus. "She only said you weren't ready to be a father, and that she chose to raise us herself rather than force parenthood on someone who wasn't prepared for it." "That's generous of her," Marcus managed, thinking how differently he might have characterized his own behavior. "Mom always says people shouldn't be judged by their worst moments," Jaden added, speaking for the first time, "but by how they choose to move forward." A glimmer of hope flickered in Marcus's chest. "I'd like to move forward if you'll allow it. Get to know you, be part of your lives in whatever way you're comfortable with." "Why now?" Joshua asked bluntly. "You've known about us for at least 3 years, according to our mother's information. Your interest intensified only when her fortune exceeded yours." "That looks suspicious," Jordan agreed. "From a game theory perspective, your optimal strategy would be to establish connection with potential heirs when your own financial situation became precarious." The clinical way they analyzed his motives was both impressive and devastating. These boys thought like CEOs, not teenagers seeking a father. "I understand why you'd think that," Marcus said carefully. "The timing does look convenient, but seeing you, knowing you exist, has changed something fundamental in me. Money aside, I've realized what I sacrificed through my own selfishness." Jaden studied him with an intensity that reminded Marcus of Zoe. "We never missed you," he said finally. "That's the thing you should understand. We had everything we needed. It's you who lost, not us." The simple truth of those words struck deeper than any accusation could have. These extraordinary young men had grown up complete, whole, and loved without him. His absence had been their mother's challenge, not their tragedy. The meal progressed with careful conversation. The boys asked about his background, his business, his interests, gathering information like the strategic thinkers they'd been raised to be. They shared selective details about their own lives, maintaining careful boundaries. There were no emotional breakthroughs, no sudden connections, just the cautious beginning of acquaintance. As the evening concluded, Joshua spoke for the three of them. "We appreciate your honesty today. We'll need time to process this meeting, but we're open to occasional contact moving forward. Our mother suggested family counseling if we decide to pursue a relationship of any kind." "I'd welcome that," Marcus said sincerely. "We should be clear," Jordan added. "We have no expectations regarding inheritance or financial support. The Johnson Foundation has established trusts for each of us that ensure our independence." "And we won't be changing our names," Jaden stated firmly. "We're Johnsons. That's who we've always been." After they left, Marcus remained at the table, staring at the 3 water glasses they'd left behind. The meeting had gone as well as could reasonably be expected, yet he felt hollow. These poised, brilliant young men had no need for him. They were offering potential acquaintance out of curiosity and perhaps compassion, not out of any sense of lack in their lives. The next morning, Marcus finally replied to Zoe's email, accepting the Johnson Ventures investment proposal. The documents arrived for his signature within hours, perfect in their professionalism, with terms exactly as promised. No punitive clauses, no excessive controls, just a fair business arrangement from a position of overwhelming strength. In his Manhattan office, Marcus signed the papers that solidified his minority position in his own company, saving it from bankruptcy but forever changing his status. The irony wasn't lost on him. Being rescued by the woman he had once dismissed as insufficient, becoming subordinate to the empire she had built while raising his sons alone. Beside the investment documents lay a photo of the triplets he had taken during their brief meeting, a reminder of the true cost of his abandonment, a price no fortune could ever compensate. Meanwhile, in her headquarters in Los Angeles, Zoe finalized documents for the acquisition of the Asian hotel chain, consolidating Johnson Enterprises as a global conglomerate valued at nearly $5 billion. Her sons sat around the boardroom table, eagerly contributing ideas and learning the business they would one day lead. A notification on her phone showed a headline about Reynolds FinTech surviving thanks to an anonymous investor, the Johnson Ventures investment she had authorized not out of vengeance or compassion, but as a purely business decision. For Zoe Johnson, the best revenge was never destroying Marcus Reynolds. It was living so extraordinarily well without him that his absence became irrelevant, transforming the most painful rejection of her life into the foundation of her most complete triumph. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.